Hello, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And welcome again to our show. It's our unit on the environment, the world around us, and it seems like things are happening all the time that are bad. And so we always need to do things to protect the environment. And now we've got problems happening out in the oceans there. So the UN is trying to do something about protecting international waters.
Yeah, I like part of this. They are worried about some of these countries sailing over the seas and maybe overfishing, or they start mining. Sea mining is really destructive to the environment of the ocean. So they're trying to help protect the ocean waters.
That's what they're trying to do. And the United Nations, of course, is trying to get everybody to do something about it. So they've got this treaty or this agreement which is trying to protect international waters. It aims to do that. That is the UN's goal here. And let's find out what this is all about, everybody. So remember, again, today is our all-English lecture, so we won't have our Chinese teacher. The reason we're having our all-English lecture today is because our Chinese teacher was really tired and wanted to have the day off. So, yes, we're going to speak
Not
totally.
Really.
Just kidding, of course. But we have this type of lesson in our magazine every month. So, yes, sit back and prepare to hear nothing but English. And let's get to it. Let's read the entire contents of our lesson now one time. A new United Nations agreement could be finalized this year, protecting marine life in what's known as the high seas. The term refers to the vast areas of ocean that are not within any country's jurisdiction. Countries bordering the sea are allowed to extend their territory 22 kilometers from their coasts. A further 350 kilometers beyond that is considered to be a special economic zone in which countries have exclusive rights to fishing, oil, and other resources. Outside of these designated areas, however, the oceans are ungoverned international waters, where legal jurisdiction is hard to determine and laws are difficult to enforce, meaning nations can act as they please. This situation has led to great harm in ocean environments. Overfishing has depleted some fish species, excessive amounts of garbage have been dumped, and seabed mining has destroyed ocean ecosystems. These activities have not only damaged global marine environments, but also hurt small island nations that depend on fishing and natural resources off their shores, resources that have deteriorated due to unregulated ventures in the high seas. The UN High Seas Treaty will bring regulation to international waters. It will govern activities on the high seas to ensure that all nations can benefit from ocean resources equally while protecting biological diversity. Wonderful as this may sound, the treaty is not all about the environment. Some of it relates to commercial profit. Pharmaceutical and biofuel companies, for example, are trying to gain rights through the treaty to patent genetic sequences that they discover in ocean organisms. The agreement's principles were informally proposed around 2015 and led to formal negotiations in 2018 and 2019. Finalization of the treaty was planned for earlier this year, but COVID-19 concerns delayed further talks. While there are no further meetings scheduled at the moment, negotiations are expected to be finalized whenever talks resume.
Okay, guys, let's dive in. We're going to be speaking a little bit slower in this unit because there's no help from the Chinese teacher.
Oh, no.
And we have to remember, Tom, no Chinese. So let's take a look at this. United Nations Treaty aims to protect international waters. Anytime you see international waters, you're talking about parts of the ocean that officially a country doesn't own, or they don't have the rights to that particular part of the ocean. International waters. Even now, I know lately, especially this last year, we've seen some countries, we won't say who they are, we've seen some countries try to take control of different areas of the international waters. And once you set yourselves up there, it's hard to get rid of you. Anyway, right now we're trying to get these different nations around the world to sign a treaty. A treaty is just an agreement between countries. There's no real enforcement. Sometimes you just sign these treaties and you hope the other side will, keep to their agreement. But, there's no one telling them, oh, we're going to put you in jail if you don't. So I think these treaties are nice, but it's the United Nations, so who knows what's going to happen.
Indeed. So it's a treaty, a formal agreement between countries. And yes, they're trying to protect international waters. Hopefully they can do this. Otherwise, the oceans are going to be one big garbage pile and we're all going to die.
It's the garbage that really bothers me.
Exactly right. We should figure out ways to solve that problem here. But here in the first paragraph, it says, a new United Nations agreement could be finalized this year, protecting marine life in what's known as the high seas. So yes, we've got the United Nations, the UN, and they've got this agreement, but it's not quite finalized, okay? They're working on it. It's like in a rough draft form right now, but it might possibly be finalized this year. In other words, we'll see the final version of this treaty, and hopefully it will take effect and people will respect this agreement.
High seas might be an interesting phrase for our listeners. It's a phrase that was invented or created a long time ago. And the definition is just the ocean, parts of the ocean that no one really controls legally. So maritime law is what we call laws that apply to the ocean waters. So sail on the high seas. Sometimes you'll see that phrase in novels. Yes, he was sailing the high seas or sailing on the high seas. So they are trying to come up with an agreement to get countries to all agree to the same thing. It's not always easy, especially if some of those countries really depend on the ocean for their livelihoods or for the food that they eat. So we're going to talk about that. It says here the term high seas refers to the vast areas of ocean that are not within any country's jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is a word you'll see a lot if you study law, or maybe you want to go into politics. Jurisdiction is an agreed upon area that someone has control over. And sometimes we'll use it as a joke. I know in my family, since my dad was a lawyer, we would often joke about how that's not your jurisdiction. If my brother was trying to tell me I couldn't do something, that would be something I would say back to him as a joke. But jurisdiction, it's used a lot with law and with laws that are passed, but it's the official power to make legal decisions for a particular area.
Exactly. So, of course, this is subjective. Some countries claim certain areas while other countries say, no, that's not yours. Yes, it is. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. And we fight back and forth all the time about that stuff. And let's go on to the next paragraph here. It says, countries bordering the sea are allowed to extend their territory 22 kilometers from their coasts. Okay, so yes, if you're within 22 kilometers of your own country's coast, then that jurisdiction is for that country, okay? If you're outside of that, then it's supposed to be the high seas. Then that is international territory, and we're all supposed to get along like brothers and sisters out there.
We're supposed to share.
Exactly, we're supposed to share it. We're supposed to be fair like the civilized human beings that we are.
So a further 350 kilometers beyond the 22 kilometers Tom just talked about, that's considered to be a special economic zone in which countries have exclusive rights to fishing, oil, and other resources. So they have the 22 kilometers that is out from the coast of their country, and then 350 beyond that, they still have control over that area, and they control the fishing rights there. If oil is discovered, they own the oil, and they have other resources, of course, that they can also control. So they have quite a bit of a space, it extends quite far from their coasts for these countries.
Exactly. And, of course, they have those exclusive rights to fishing in that zone. Exclusive means it belongs to them only. It doesn't belong to anyone else. Perhaps if you're young, or at least when I was young in my hometown, there was a private golf club or a private country club. So membership was exclusive. Not everybody could be members of that country club. You had to be rich enough and you had to go through an interview before they would let you join the country club there. But in this particular case, yes, we're talking about exclusive fishing rights in those areas of ocean. Also, you have exclusive rights to the oil there and other resources that you might find in that area of the ocean.
Let me give you a different, slightly different use of exclusive. Sometimes if you're looking to take a vacation, you'll come across an exclusive resort. They'll use that word exclusive in their ads because it makes it sound like it's really special. Only certain people can go. A lot of these hotels or resorts that are called exclusive aren't because they're going to tell you can't go. It means that they're very expensive. So unless you have a lot of money, you probably can't afford the cost of those places. So exclusive, as Tom said, it just means limited to a certain group or limited to a certain area. You could also say if you're a singer and somebody wants to represent you and they're your agent, they have exclusive negotiation rights with different movie companies and things like that you might work for. Exclusive. Nobody else can represent you. So these countries have exclusive rights to the resources there. And outside of these designated areas, however, it says the oceans are ungoverned international waters, which just means it's a little chaotic. People go and do what they want to do. And a lot of people are still overfishing and killing some of the fish in the ocean that we're trying to protect, but they don't care. They're in international waters, and as long as they can kill what they need to and get away fast, nobody arrests them or they're not in trouble for doing that sort of thing.
Right, so legal jurisdiction is hard to define or it's hard to determine, and the laws are difficult to enforce.
Very.
You don't have any international police force out there trying to say, hey, you can't be out there fishing, it's illegal. Heh, I can do whatever I want. What are you going to do about it, huh?
Yeah.
And that means nations can act as they please, and as you said, they could run away quickly, and then when the police are gone, they can go right back in there. Now, moving on to the next paragraph here, it says, this situation has led to great harm in ocean environments. Okay, so yes, indeed, because of this situation, there has been a lot of damage or harm to these various ocean environments.
That's the sad part of all of this. We're going to talk about what some of the harm is, what's been happening to these areas on the high seas. But first, guys, we're going to take a quick break. We're not going to listen to our Chinese teacher, though. We're just going to take a break and then we'll be back.
Okay, let's continue with our lesson. We're talking about a new United Nations treaty which might be finalized this year, and they want to protect marine life in the high seas. But of course, we've got these countries with borders, and it's kind of difficult sometimes to determine the jurisdiction of countries beyond that 22-kilometer limit.
And the 350.
And the 350-kilometer limit beyond the coast there as well. And so we've got to be careful about what's going on in the ocean out there. And again, it's difficult to enforce the laws out there because people can basically do whatever they want. Because, again, that legal jurisdiction is hard to figure out. Now, of course, this has led to great harm in the ocean environment, and overfishing has depleted some fish species. Excessive amounts of garbage have been dumped, and seabed mining has destroyed ocean ecosystems. So we're talking about three problems here: depleted fish species, lots of garbage, and seabed mining. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about overfishing. That means fishing too much for fish out there. They don't have time enough to reproduce, so their populations or the number of fish just keeps going down and down and down. So we talk about depleted fish species. Depleted here is from the verb to deplete, which means basically to have something totally disappear. You've used it all up.
We also have excessive amounts of garbage have been dumped in the ocean, which is horrible. Excessive here just means so much, too much, that it's negative. It's a bad thing. Excessive means more than necessary, more than normal, more than is desirable. So we unfortunately have some countries that are dumping garbage right into the ocean, and that's really hurting the marine life there. But ultimately, it's going to start hurting people too as we fish and we get our supply of seafood from the ocean. We'll find out that some of these fish have things inside their bodies we shouldn't be eating. So yeah, excessive amounts of garbage have been dumped. Seabed mining is when you go to the bottom of the ocean floor and you're actually mining for different rocks or minerals, things that you can find and sell. And that seabed mining has destroyed ocean ecosystems. An ecosystem includes all the plants and animals and the fish that live in a particular area. And if you mess up one part of that ecosystem, whether it's the seabed or maybe overfishing a particular type of fish that keeps another fish from getting too big, you've messed up or cause great harm to the ecosystem. That's a bad thing long term.
It is. So those are the three problems, and these activities have not only damaged global marine environments, but also hurt small island nations that depend on fishing and natural resources off their shores.
Sure.
And those are resources that have deteriorated due to unregulated ventures in the high seas. So yes, not only, but also. So not only has these environments been damaged or have these environments been damaged, but also island nations have also been hurt because they depend on fishing and other natural resources off of their shores. So again, we've got lots of damage going out there and endangering the marine environment. Marine means having to do with the ocean. We're talking about resources that have been deteriorated because of unregulated business ventures in the high seas. So here we've got deteriorated. That's kind of difficult to say, deteriorated. But that's from the verb to deteriorate, which means things get slowly worse and worse.
Yeah, if somebody is in the hospital, they might not ever recover, and they might get worse and worse over time. So you could say, yeah, he's deteriorated to the point where he's in ICU now. So things get worse and worse over time. Ventures here is a word that usually we see in business. If you're a venture capitalist, you're somebody who raises a lot of money to invest in a new business. Here, unregulated ventures. Venture here could mean a kind of risky or daring sort of undertaking. It could be a daring business adventure, but this is unregulated ventures in the high seas. People going out and doing things that damage or cause great harm to the ocean. I wanted to point out here, guys, you're going to see in the high seas in this article and on the high seas. And you're probably thinking, hey, why are you confusing this? Why are you confusing us with these prepositions? If we use in the high seas, we're talking about activities that actually happen in the ocean, under the surface of the ocean. For example, the seabed mining. If you're on the high seas, you are on top of the water, you're probably in a boat. So that's the difference between in the high seas and on the high seas.
Yep, and that's all because of unregulated ventures or business activity. Let's move on now to the next paragraph here. It says, the UN High Seas Treaty will bring regulation to international waters. Hopefully. You never know what kind of power the UN has, but let's all hope for the best here. It should bring about some regulation, okay? And hopefully people will respect these regulations and realize, yes, these problems are real and they affect everybody. So, yeah, we should try to abide by these rules.
The UN High Seas Treaty could bring regulation to international waters. It will govern or control activities on the high seas to ensure that all nations can benefit from ocean resources equally. Good luck with that. While also protecting biological diversity. Diversity just means the variety of different marine life in the ocean. Wonderful as this may sound, the treaty is not all about the environment. It also relates to commercial profit or money that can be made doing business. So how do they make profit, or how do they get this commercial profit? We've got two different industries that the article talks about. Pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry includes the companies that make drugs that we take to keep our bodies alive and well, and also the biofuel industry. So there are different ways to produce fuel, and biofuel would come from organic products rather than fossil fuels. Now, we've got some examples here. For example, these two different industries are trying to gain rights through the treaty to patent genetic sequences that they discover in ocean organisms. This just sounds really kind of creepy to me, I've got to be honest. Anytime you start messing around with genes and DNA, I want to stay away from that. But if you patent something, guys, you might have heard of this, especially if you're very inventive. Are you an inventor? If you're an inventor, you want to get a patent. That's the noun use of this. You want to get a patent on whatever you've invented so that you control the rights to that particular thing you've invented. Now, if you patent something, this is the verb form. It just means you go to some sort of government authority to get the rights to something. So they're trying to get the rights to genetic sequencing that they're working on, that they discover in ocean organisms. I don't know why they want to do this, but organisms are any living thing. They can be tiny, 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 or they can be as big as people. But yeah, they're trying to get a patent on genetic sequencing. Organism officially just could be any animal. It could be a plant too, guys, or a single-celled life form, which is tiny.
The agreement's principles were informally proposed around 2015, about 5 years ago, and led to formal negotiations in 2018 and 2019, just a couple of years ago. So if you get different people sitting around and talking about things and trying to come to a conclusion or to make an agreement, we say they are negotiating. That's the verb to negotiate, to cooperate with each other to try to come up with some answers. And negotiation is the noun, and there are a lot of these sessions that take place, so this is a countable noun, negotiations. Negotiations are going quite well.
Yeah, we negotiate in life all the time. It doesn't have to be an official negotiation process, like peace talks between two countries that have been enemies. It could be you just going to your boss and trying to get a higher salary, so you negotiate on some sort of raise. It's good to really work on your negotiation skills, because the better you can negotiate, the better your results will be in whatever you're trying to negotiate on. So, yeah, they had formal negotiations back in 2018 and 2019. Finalization of the treaty was planned for earlier this year, but as everyone knows who's listening to this program, life kind of just stopped for everybody in 2020 with COVID-19. People could no longer travel freely, and a lot of people were in countries where they had to stay in their houses. Thank goodness Taiwan handled it a lot better, and we had some freedom here. I'm really grateful for that.
Pretty cool. Okay. So, yeah, because of COVID-19, lots of things got screwed up here.
Yeah.
And I kind of was hoping that, hey, maybe this problem could have been solved by COVID-19, because they were talking about people staying home and driving their cars less, so there was less pollution and stuff like that. It did have a bright side to it, I guess. There was a silver lining in some regard there. But I don't think it's going to go quite that far in terms of stopping overfishing and dumping garbage in the ocean and stuff like that. I'm kind of pessimistic like you are there, Stephanie.
Yeah.
And while there are no further meetings scheduled at the moment, negotiations are expected to be finalized whenever talks resume. Okay, so yeah, they hammered out this treaty in 2018 and 2019. It might be finalized this year or at least very soon, but they don't have any additional meetings planned. They aren't scheduled at the moment, but the negotiations are going to continue at some time in the future. We're going to talk about the talks resuming. Okay, to resume just means to continue after something has been delayed. This meeting will resume tomorrow at 4 o'clock, for example.
To resume something just means, like Tom said, you paused something for a while and then you started it up again. Maybe right after Chinese New Year, remember we had to pause and shut down schools for a while, 2 weeks, and then they resumed after that. Right now, I think that's all we have for you today. So we hope you learned a little bit more about the United Nations treaty that they've been trying to work on. And we hope that somehow people will all join together and we can keep our oceans clean and safe for the marine life and in them, because we depend on marine life too.
And hopefully the human race will continue for another 1,000 years or so. And if it doesn't, who knows, life will come back again in millions of years. Okay, that brings us to the end of our lesson for today. Thank you for joining us, and please join us again next time. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.